Maayong aga sa inyo tanan. Si Matt Dire, Matt Acosta, and I bring greetings from my wife and my family, and of course from the brethren here in Connecticut, there is International Baptist Church. Pangamuyo kami, nagadumdumi kami sa inyo sa pagpangamuyo, binas sa mga kauturan ta sa Pilipinas and for the entire nation. I know that nationally you are going through a crisis with COVID-19. And I'm not sure how effective it is, but yesterday Russia released a news nga nakakita na sila sa vaccine. I'm not sure what that would mean for us globally and for the global market, but I do hope and pray that by God's mercy, humanity would find its cure to this pandemic. And above all, I do pray nga tayo makilala man sang kalibutan ang Ginoo sa aton si Kristo Jesus, who is the only way, the truth, and the life, and the only way in which man can be right with God. So for our meditation this morning, I'd like to lead you or your attention to Psalm 73. And I'd like to begin by asking, ano bala ang purpose ng aton nga paging matutom sa Ginoo? Siguro perhaps you've asked yourself this question before in your life. Ginoo, ano bala ang use naging matutom ko sa imo? Life only brings me pain, trouble, and suffering. Why live in such a way that's, may integrity, with obedience and faithfulness to the Lord, only to have our lives experience suffering and pain and trials? On the other hand, why do the wicked, and by the way, when I mean wicked, the Bible is not always someone who is morally bad, but it could be someone nga wala nag-acknowledge ng Ginoo. Why do the wicked, while being proud, increase more in power and prosperity? Nga sila pa Ginoo ang nagabugana. Ang motong wala nagasik sa imo, ang wala nagmatutom sa imo, sila pa ang nagabugana, sila pa ang nagaprosper, sila pa ang do medyo malipayon sa kabuhi. How is it that the faithful suffer while the wicked seems to have such a great time? And I guess a more fitting question with what's going on in our country or in the Philippines today, I know many of you are facing this dilemma. Ano mo na, Pastor? Kung magwa ka, sure, magtrabaho ka, you are risking yourself to being infected by COVID-19. Pero kung hindi ka naman magtrabaho, mapabiling ka naman sa balay, you're also risking yourself and your entire family to hunger. Diin mas worse sa duwa. You go out there and die of COVID-19 or remain in your house and risking to starving your entire family. And so, I'm not sure how many of you are listening to this right now. Ikaw, nagapanawagan sa Ginoo, you're crying to the Lord for mercy, you live faithfully, you trust the Lord with all your heart, and yet why is it all this trouble and suffering and pain are going on in your life? What's the use? What's the use? But you see, how do we believers wrap our minds around this seemingly, I would call it, ironic realities in life? And so, sa sining aga, sa pagtanaw ta diri sa Psalm 73, in which dili makita naton ang observation ni Asaph sa kabuhi kag mga struggles niya. Makita naton diri, hopefully we could learn some of his realizations here as he entered into the presence of God. Paano niyo bala sa verse 13, humble niya, all in vain have I kept my heart clean and washed my hands in innocence. For all day long I have been stricken and rebuked every morning. If I had said, I will speak thus, I would have betrayed the generation of your children. But when I thought how to understand this, it seemed to me a wearisome task. Now, I'm not sure kung sa pagbasa niyo sini, sa pagbasa ko ni Bala, masense ko diri ang pain kag ang agony ni Asaph diri. There seems to be a mixed emotion as he writes this particular portion of this chapter. There is a sense of struggle. There is a sense of questions here. There's a sense of confusion. And take note diri beginning verse 13, there seems to be two struggles within Asaph here nga naga-bother sa iya. Verse 13, tanaw niyo bala, first of all, humble ya, all in vain have I kept my heart clean. Nagahambal siya bala nga, did I keep my heart pure for nothing? Ano ba ang pulos or ang purpose nga nagakabuhi ako in such a way that is pure? Verse 13 also, I washed my hands in innocence. In other words, did I keep myself innocent for no reason? How so? Kaya bala sa verse 14, anong pulos ni? If I only get trouble all day long, every morning brings me pain. And moreover, verse 15, hambal niya, but if I had spoken this way to others, I would have also been a traitor to your people. So it's almost like he's saying here, gambal sa bilang, Ginoo, ano ang pulos sa akong nga paging matinumanon sa imo? What's the purpose of me being faithful to you, walking in a righteousness, pursuing holiness, to live in a pure lives, to live an innocent life, only that I would get suffering, trouble, and pain. Worse, verse 15, if I share this to others, if I share my complaints to others, if I make my struggle public and transparent to other people, ano na ang testimony ko? And how would that reflect to you, especially kung sino ikaw sa kabuhi ko, especially sa ibang nga mga tao? That would be a bad testimony to them also. And so sa verse 16, when I thought how to understand this, it seemed to me a wearisome task. So makita natin today in verse 16 that Asaph tries to understand the ways of God. Nga Ginoo, amo ining kakalatapo. I try to understand this ironic or seemingly ironic realities in life, but that he also could not. So nakita niyo dong duwa ka struggle dere. His first struggle is he wants to giving up being faithful. He wants to give up pursuing holiness. He wants to give up living righteously and faithfully and in innocence, because only what he gets is trouble, hardships, and pain. The second struggle he has is he tries to understand God's ways, but at the same time, he could not understand God's ways. So ano obrahon niya? Ano bi ang iya? What is he to do here? What is he to do? Now, first of all, tagaan to ka mo sa gamay nga background dali kung paano, how did Asaph here get himself into this particular situation. Now, verse 1, if you turn with me to verse 1, hambal niya dira, truly God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. And, I mean, isn't this true? I'm not sure with you. Ang Ginoo bala naging matinumanon, has he been faithful or has he been good to you? Is this a common experience to many people? I would say yes. And for Asaph here, that's also his observation. A lot of people, to those who are pure in heart, to those who have been faithful to him, when we look back into our lives or in our lives in the past, we can say that God has been faithful to us. That God has been good to us. That all things work together for good for us, for his glory and for my good. But you see in verse 2, what I like about Asaph, first of all, is that he's never, wala sang filter man. He is just all out transparent. He's all out blunt about his experience. He was not afraid to admit that he's struggling. And he's full of questions. Somebody says verse 2, but as for me, amuna experience nyo, you see God is faithful, you see God as a good person, as good in your life. But as for me, my feet had almost stumbled. My steps had nearly slipped. Is this something that you can resonate with? Is this something na makarelate ka kay Asaph? What he is saying here, yes, amuna experiensya nyo, especially to the majority who are walking faithfully before the Lord. But as for me, I experience pain every day. I experience only suffering. I only experience hardships in life. That's why he says in verse 13, what's the use, right? Now, he even goes on in verse 3, amo pagini ang root sa iyang problema. It's because hambalin sa verse 3, the reason why he's going through this struggle, kaya hambalin sa verse 3, for I was envious of the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. So diri gali natin makita, first of all, ang root sa iyang problema. Why he started to ask these questions? It is because, first of all, makita natin that he started to compare his life with other people. He started to compare his life with other people. And not just that, he started to be envious and to covet the things that he does not have. Nga may ara. sa ila. Tanong abla sa verse 4 to 12. If you have the time, read this for yourself, but I'll just give you here the outline what Asaph here has unpacked for us from verse 4 to 12. He elaborated for us here the prosperity of the wicked. After some verse 3, di ba, hambal niya, he's envious. Nahisa siya sa prosperity sang ining mga taong wala nagakahadlok sa Ginoo. They are prosperous, they are proud, and they are powerful from verse 4 to 12. So I don't know how many of you here can resonate with Asaph. And I think it's a human nature not to be envious of someone. When we started compare our life to them in this age of comparison, in this age of consumerism, we have the tendency to compare our lives to others. And this is where Asaph have gone wrong to begin with. That's the reason why damo isang question sa kabuhay niya. It is because to begin with, he started looking at other people's lives. And so he started being envious. He started coveting their what they have there. And so what is he to do? Now, what is he to do? Makita natin diri ang pivotal point niya. In this particular chapter, may turn around, may climax ini diri nga chapter. And if you go to verse 17, so verse 17, hambal niya diri, okay, hambal niya diri, until I went into the sanctuary of God, then I discern their end. Then I discern their end. Until I went into the sanctuary of God. So here again, let's review that for a moment. Verse 13 to 16, he's struggling with his own walk with God. Kag ang pag-intindi niya sa ways ng Ginoo, ano ba lang purpose naging matutom siya niya kung not only to have his life experience pain, suffering, and trials. In fact, it explained from verse 1 all the way to verse 12. Kung sa diin, he was envious. Experience niya hindi common. Just like any other believers in God. Nga kung sa diin siya naka-experience siya sang trouble lang and pain and suffering, while the rest of the people, of course, the people of God would find him good. And also because of that, nakita natin and realized that the root problem that he has is that he started to look at other people's lives. That's why he was envious. But then, the pivotal point here of the entire psalm is verse 17. Hambal niya, I'm experiencing all these things until he went into the presence of God. Until he went into the sanctuary of God. And naghambal siya dira that I discern their end. Now, tanong niyo sa verse 17. By the way, what is a sanctuary? Sanctuary is a place in which worship takes place. It is the worship center of the community. So, dira nagakadto ang mga tao to worship God. So, in other words here, Asaph went into the sanctuary of God to seek the presence of God. He went into the presence of God. In fact, we'll learn here until the end of the chapter that because he went into the sanctuary of God, he has had a better and steady compass, okay, in his spiritual life, in his walk with God. So here, ang kumangkot pala, what gave him comfort to his troubled soul? Ano nag-change sa iyang perspective? What did he learn in the presence of God as he entered into the sanctuary of God? So, as a pag-start na sa sininga aga bala, I'd like to give you one practical lesson here in hopes that it would encourage us the way we look at life and our attitude towards our present circumstance. So, makita dito sa verse 18 to 19. This is the first practical lesson. And hopefully in another devotion, I'd like to give two more if that's possible. Verse 18 to 19, we see here, truly you set them in a slippery places, you make them fall to ruin. How they are destroyed in a moment, swept away utterly by terrors. Now, in other words, Asaph is saying here that although the wicked do prosper, although they may increase in power, although they may be proud, verse 4 to 12, verse 18 and 19 tells us here that there will be an end to them. There'll come a time that their prosperity will end, their pride will end, their powers will end. And do you know what that means for you and for me? What does that mean para sa imo kag sa akon? That our troubles also will end, our pains also will end, our trials also will end, our sufferings will end, the pandemic will end. This too soon shall pass. and so is our trials and our tribulations. In other words, makita ta diri bala nga all this time, the reason why Asaph was envious, the reason why Asaph was troubled in his soul, the reason why Asaph is struggling with his inner struggles, it is because he is seeing life from a temporal perspective rather than the eternal perspective. That's the reason why he was bitter. That's the reason why he's giving all these complaints how things are in life. It's because he looks at life from a temporary perspective. He is short-sighted. Ang nakita niya kung ano lang ang sa temporary, in this life only, and he has not seen and he has forgotten about the things that are eternal. And because of that, as a result, ang evaluation niya sa iyang kabuhi was from the wrong perspective. It was rather from a temporal than eternal perspective. At kabalo ka mo mga kauturan, in light of eternity, ang aton nga kabuhi, kung sa James pa 4:14, I believe, ang bala, our life is but a vapor. It is fleeting. It does not last. To illustrate that, siguro sa sining aga, gatig-ang ka mo subong. How many of you bala sa inyo subong nagatig-ang? And sa pagtigang nyo, pagkatapos ng tigdang, can open yung kaldero nyo or inyong mga tiligangan, the rice cooker, but then immediately you realize that there's a mist or there's this a smoke or mist that comes out of your rice cookers, and before you even make sense of it, or before you nakita ng smoke or ng steam, nadula na ang steam. Nadula na ang steam. And that's the kind of analogy and picture James gives us, how quickly life passes away. Before you even realize it, before you even enjoy it, before you even make sense of it, nadula na ang kabuhi. That's how quickly or quick life is for us. But you see, makita diri, na si Asaph, na-discover niya that life is only temporary. He learned that the wealth of the arrogant and the wicked does not last. And hambal sa verse 18 to 19, judgment will come upon them. So, friends, mga kauturan, brothers and sisters in the Lord, I think the lesson that we can get here is that we need to shift our perspective from temporal to eternal. Do not lose heart when life seems to not be in your favor or when troubles come, because God is in it. And so, that's the reason all this time, the reason why he's having all these complaints and mga struggles niya is because he's looked at life at the wrong perspective. He's had this wrong evaluation all this time. But I didn't question her as we end this today. How did Asaph realize his wrong evaluation in life? It is because verse 17, that is the key to this particular chapter, because he went into the presence of God. And not only Asaph became conscious of God's presence, but sa presensya sa Ginoo, he was able to see life from God's perspective. Ang mga balang challenge diri sa aton tanan sa sininga aga is that, for ang importante bala ang regular nga pag-commune naton sa Ginoo. Enter into the presence of God, into his sanctuary, until our soul is gripped by the eternal realities. Until our minds are enlightened to see eternal realities. Because it is in this perspective we'll be able to see how temporary life is. Dumdum ko wala back in 2015, I was still in Pennsylvania doing my grad studies, and that was a year before nga nagpakasal kami ni Rika. And that time, grabe among mga plans. We were talking about moving to Pennsylvania, but then, eventually, before I even knew it, I was laid off from my job. I lost my job because nag-struggle ang school that time financially, so they had to let go some of their employees and some of their professors. Kakabalo ka mo, just a month ago, I think back in June, natapos nga ang lockdown. Sure, pero after 3 months, pero abi namon ang economy sa US naging mayu-mayu na, only to realize that the economy is not going any good. And so because of that, as a result, si Rika, she also lost her job from her firm sa architectural firm dito sa Greenwich. And because of that, a lot of our plans were delayed. Damo sa mga ships sa amon yung mga plans. In fact, may isa lang nag-joke sa amon that, you know what, the most useless item for this year is a 2020 planner because God determines it all. The Lord gives and the Lord takes. The things we work for, the wealth we've built, our friends will come and go. All our accomplishments will soon pass. But you see, what's comforting about this truth is that all these uncertainties, okay, despite all these uncertainties, it's the fact that God works all things together for good, exclusively for his children. God is pro us. And what that means for you and for me is that even all our troubles, ang tanan natin ng mga problema, aton yung mga trials, all our sufferings, these things too will also pass, and we'll soon realize that God made all things beautiful in his time, for his glory and for his name's sake. So mga katuran, our darkest days too, that will pass. Only life with God is permanent. Only life with God will last forever. So mga kauturan, friends, listeners, we must admit how short term our view is. And God's view is from eternity to eternity. That's why his evaluation, his plans, his will for us is always best. And therefore we must come into the presence of God to see life from eternal perspective. So let me encourage you. Don't think of your faithfulness to God to be in vain. Continue to be faithful. Continue to trust him. Continue to live for him. But in order for us not to lose sight of these eternal realities, I encourage you to regularly meet with your Heavenly Father in your quiet time, in your prayer time, in your family altar, or even sa devotional times like this, kada aga, that's a Doane Church. So I don't know how the Lord has spoken to you this morning. If God has spoken to you, would you please let the staff of Doane Baptist Church know? Maybe mga questions, can we have any prayer requests? Let us know in the comment section below. And again, thank you for the privilege of allowing me to be part of your morning. And may God bless you, and may God keep you and be gracious to you, and may cause his face to shine upon you and give you peace. May Acosta.